Right. In this video, we're going to be setting up this search homepage, making it look a little bit more like an actual Rate My BYU Professor page. So we'll add a little bit of search functionality, hopefully, and just get things looking a little bit better. In this video, I'll also be talking a little bit about how to style your app and just give you guys some resources that you can use to learn a little bit more about how to style in Mendix. So let's just start by fixing up this home page a little bit. So currently you see right now, there's not really much going on. There's just some text. Let's start by just editing this top bar up here where it says My New App. So in order to do that, in Mendix, there's things called layouts. And we actually have a layouts folder over here on the left that you'll notice. And in the layouts folder, there's this top bar layout. So let's click into that. And layouts are really nice because it allows you to apply styling to multiple pages. And this is actually where we have this nav bar right here, and also where we have this text up top. So we can actually just edit this for our entire project right now. So let's just change this to say, rate my BYU professors. And yeah, you can make it say whatever you want, but now if we go back here, you'll notice, okay, cool. We fixed the header up top. That's great. And let's actually add an image as well to this page. I think that will make it look a little bit better. We can add like a header image to make it look a little bit more like an actual website with content on it. So I actually, before this video, I had previously downloaded and added an image into our images folder all the way down here. And so if we click into this, you'll see there is a BYU campus background image that I'm just going to make, or I'm just going to put it at the top of the page here. So let's do that. So in order to add an image to your project, if you look over here on the right, in your toolbox, there's an option to add a static image. That's what we're going to want. So let's drag that into our app, and we're going to put it right here. And you'll see that there's all sorts of stuff. Let's just search for BYU. There it is, BYU campus background. And boom, there we go. It's pretty big. Let's actually turn this on. Okay. So how do we make this image a little bit smaller? Because right now that's going to be way too big for our page. Let's hop over here. So if we just double click into the image, it'll pop up with some properties. And so you'll see a width and a height. So let's just experiment with this a little bit. You can do width and height either as a set pixels amount or as a percentage. So I'm actually going to do both. Let's do 100% width. So that'll cover the entire screen width-wise. And then height, let's just give it an arbitrary height. Maybe let's try 200, see how that looks. And I think the rest of this looks okay. So we'll just click OK. Oh, nice. And you'll see, okay, now the image looks a little bit better width and height-wise, but you'll see that the image is squashed. So how do we deal with that? So actually to deal with this, Mendix has some built-in appearance properties, but you'll see that you can't actually access them from here. You have to go over into this, let's see, and oh, sorry, not this. If you click into properties right here, there's a styling panel. And that's where we can edit some of these things. So these are all design properties for this image. So we can actually make this fit property right here, make it look a little bit better by, let's try cover. I think that's the one that'll make it look better. Oh, yeah, there we go. And you'll notice that if we were to click into some of these other ones, it'll do different things like fill. I think that's the default. Contain. Now it keeps the image dimensions, but it doesn't expand the entire page. And then let's see what scale down does. Looks like the same thing for here. So we want cover for sure. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to save these changes, and let's hop over to our browser and take a look at how the app looks now. All right, it's just updating. Okay, perfect. Let's hop over to the browser and you'll see your app has been updated. And now we have a little header or like an image banner, and Rate My BYU Professors is now the name of our app. So that's great. That wasn't too hard. I will just take a moment at this point in the video to just briefly mention that there's actually lots of other styling options that you can do. And in this walkthrough tutorial, I don't know if I'll be able to dive in too deeply to some of these principles of styling that you can apply in Mendix, but I will definitely link some videos and other resources that you can look at to learn more about styling. So just really, really briefly, if you have any background in doing any sort of web development, then you're probably familiar with HTML and CSS. And Mendix is built on those same technologies. And Mendix also uses CSS for styling. And so you can actually, if you have any desire to learn more about this, you can actually apply your own CSS styles and classes right here. And so I won't be going into that, how to do that right now. But if you do have a desire to learn more about that, you can apply custom styling to any element or widget in your project. So it's actually very versatile. You don't have to just, go with Mendix's default style settings if you don't want to. So just so you know, that's a really helpful thing to do. And that's just down here in this class and style. That's where you can do that. Oh, I should also mention as well that styling, if you did want to add your own CSS styling, you would be able to add it here in this styling in the app module. And then under the web folder, you can click into these to add your CSS files. But if you don't have any desire to learn any of that, no pressure at all. You definitely don't need to build an incredible app. Okay, next thing. So we have a header. Let's change the text maybe to just make it a little bit more, fit what we're trying to do. So maybe we just say, because this is what I'm picturing for this page. I'm picturing maybe a search bar where it just says like search for a BYU professor or course. And then students could then, or people can then click into that box, type in what they want to search for, and then it would redirect them to a page with a list of professors and courses. So let's just start making that. So maybe search BYU professors and courses. And let's make this heading just a little bit bigger. Well, heading 3 is usually pretty good. Let's see, maybe heading 2. We'll just mess around with this for a second. This is just how you can make text bigger. So 1 is biggest, 6 is smallest. And then we'll click OK. That looks pretty good. Okay, and now let's add in a search box, and then we'll set up a simple microflow where we can just have a search functionality built in. And it's actually not too complicated to do, though I do need to explain a few things first. Well, before we do that, let's first just drop in a couple of building blocks we'll need. So we have this text right below it. We'll put a search bar. So let's go over to our toolbox and we can take a look at what's going on in here. So if we look at these options, I think text box would be a pretty appropriate thing for a search bar. So maybe we try that first, see if this works. So let's drop this in right here. And there is our text box. That looks pretty good. I'll just delete this. But you'll notice that there's some errors, right? So let's look at our errors tab. And there's 2 errors. First one is we haven't selected what it should be searching on. So it says no search variable has been selected. It doesn't know what the text box is for. The second error is this widget can only be inside of a data container. So let's just back up really fast. What is the data containers? Well, that's talking about a data grid or a data view. And so typically, actually, I think data views will be the most common you'll use. A data view is just Mendix's way of encapsulating a data or an object in your project. So we built our entities in the database, but then as we create new instances of those entities, like a new professor entity or a new rating entity, Mendix will need to pass those around our project and then encapsulate them in a data view so that things like text boxes can use the data from that object. And so that's just what a data view is, and that's why we need it here. So let's drag in a data view. And there it is. And let's throw this text box inside of it in the data view content. And you'll notice that one or both of those errors went away. And now we just have an error of the data view doesn't know what data it should be encapsulating. So that'll be the next thing we do. And we also don't need this footer. So in order to get rid of that, you can just double click into the data view. And there's a show footer property. Let's just set that to no. Okay, perfect. So now we have a data view and a little text box that doesn't do anything yet. So now let's talk about how can we set up a text or a search box. So something you might come across in your project, I'm going to hop over to the domain model because that's where we'll need to go next. You might realize that in our domain model and likely in your own project, you're going to have data that you're going to want to store in the database, but you're also going to have situations like this where we have this data view, but we don't necessarily need to get data from the database to use this data view, right? Like there's no inherent need to get all of our professors from our database just to be able to set up a search right now. Later on, we'll need to do that eventually, but just to be able to see a search box, we shouldn't need to do any sort of database or domain model stuff, right? And so how do we deal with that? Well, I want to introduce a new concept in Mendix, which is called a non-persistable entity. So all of these entities you see here in blue are called persistable entities, which just means that they're stored in the database. But for instances like this, we need a non-persistable entity, which just means that it will only exist in your browser. Like it won't be stored in the database. There's no data being stored. It's just a placeholder. And that's exactly what we need. We just need something that can store a search value and then be able to send that eventually to our domain model and say, oh, we're going to have this text field and we want to search all professors or ratings or something based on whatever values in this text field. But we don't need to store anything in our database for that. We just need a placeholder. And so that's what a non-persistable entity does. So let's create one and then it'll make a little bit more sense. If that didn't make any sense, that's okay. It's kind of confusing, especially at the start. So I'm just going to drag a new entity right here. We just created it. And let's double click into this. And you'll see right here, there's this persistable option. And it says objects of this entity can only be stored in the database if it's persistable. So we want to uncheck this. So now this means, okay, we're not storing this. This is just used as a placeholder. Let's just call this our, I don't know, maybe our search box, something like that. And so, or we could call it even just like a search field. I really don't know. I'm not good with naming things, but you can call it whatever you want. And then all we need to create on this is just a text field where we can store the input of whatever a user is searching for. And hopefully this will make more sense once we actually set it up. You'll see how it works. But let's just call this an input. This is just whatever the user is wanting to search for in our search field. And that's a string type of text. And the rest of that looks good. And then you'll remember last time we had issues with access rules. So let's just create a new module rule really fast. And this will just be users. We'll just give them full access for now. So just adding, creating, deleting, reading and writing. And then we're clicking OK. Okay, and you'll see that this non-persistable entity right here is yellow. So that's what this is. The yellow is just used to represent anything that's not actually stored in the database, but just used within the browser to just do some simple logic like that. So that's all we needed. So let's click save on the domain model. And now we have this search field entity, which will allow us to configure our data view. So our data view will just take a search view, or sorry, a search field object, and then that search field object's input attribute will then be the variable that will be fed into this text box. So let's set that up. How do we do that? That was a lot of talking. Well, we can create a microflow that will create a new search field object and pass that in to this data view where it can then be used to search on. And so let's do that. How do we do that? Let's click into our data view. And we're going to say that the source of this data view is well, we could actually for this do a Nanoflow. I don't know if the rapid developer course touched on this, but the only difference between a microflow and a nanoflow is nanoflows are like more lightweight microflows. They don't handle as much logic, so they make your program faster. So whenever you can use a nanoflow, that's definitely like the best. But if you're doing any sort of interaction with the database, you have to use a microflow. For this, though, I don't believe we need to use a microflow. So let's just first try a nanoflow. And then we'll click nanoflow, we'll click select, and then we haven't created any yet. So let's click new. And we're going to name this. There's a lot of different naming conventions in Mendix. And so if you want to name it anything, you can, but I'll put a link in this video as well for Mendix's typical naming conventions, so you just know what they are. So for any sort of data source, like we're giving data to this data view, typically you would start by abbreviating it with DS. And that should look familiar from the syntax should look familiar from the Rapid Developer course. And then we typically say the object that it's affecting or the entity that it's affecting. So this would be search field. And then we could just say, well, we could just do create search field. That's probably good enough. Naming conventions aren't like super rigid. You can kind of make it whatever you want. Okay, and now we've just created a nanoflow that will be the source for this data view. But we still have an issue, which is we made the nanoflow, but we haven't actually done anything with it. So you'll see here on the left, there's our newly created nanoflow. Let's click into this. And there we go. There's our nanoflow. So let's first just set up access rules. We have to do that with basically everything in Mendix. And I just like to do that first before I start actually working on the logic. So in order to do that, you can click on properties here on the right side of the screen. There it is. And just go down to security, allowed roles, and just select user. Just that way, so Mendix knows that users are allowed to use this microflow. Then we can click save. Looks like it's having a hard time loading. Let's give it just a second. Looks like it's. I'm going to exit out of it and then reopen it because sometimes it can be a little weird. There we go. All right. So we set up the security for this microflow. Nanoflow. The next thing we're going to do, what did we talk about we wanted to do? We wanted to create a new search field object and then pass it to the data view. Hopefully this is all making a little bit of sense now. Let's do, here we can select what activity we want. We want to do an action activity. And let's click into this and we can select which object or what activity type we want. We want to create an object. We want to create a search field object. So let's select that. The entity type is this search field right here. And that's good. New search field, that's fine for the name. Okay, and you'll see, okay, we're creating a search field. That's great. But then not only do we need to create a new search field, we need to we need to return it from this Nanoflow. And so in order to do that, we go over to this little red circle here on the right. This is like signaling the end of this Nanoflow. And so if we double click on this, you'll see that this is where we can say what we want to return, this return type right here. And so in order to find our newly created search field here, we can just type the $sign, and you'll see there it is, new search field. But you'll see we still have an issue right here. The error says it's of type main search field, but it's not expecting any return type currently. So we just need to click this update type to main search field, and that will fix our issue. And then I believe if we click OK, that should fix our issue. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Let's click save. And I believe that's all we need to do for now in this Nanoflow. We just needed to create this search field object and then pass it as a return so that it knows that it's handing it off to the data view. So let's go back over to our home page. And you'll see now this data view says that it recognizes that the object that it's receiving is a search field because we are creating it and passing it in through our Nanoflow. That's great. That means that that's working. Now we just need to configure our text box so that it is receiving the input attribute of our search field object. So let's do that. I just double clicked into the text box and we just need to select an attribute for this text box so that it knows what data it should be showing. Let's click select and you'll notice, oh, look, there's our search field object and there's the input attribute, which we want to show. Let's click select. And you'll notice all of our errors went away when we did that. Now suddenly we just have a little input. Let's actually get rid of, we don't need a label, so we can just click no for show label. Now we have a text box and a data view that is creating this non-persistable entity of a search field and giving it and feeding it to this text box. So now the text box knows, okay, I know what data I should be displaying. Let's save and run our project and take a look at these changes. Might take a second. I had to shut down the server. So hopefully this is all making a little bit of sense now. I know that between the Rapid Developer course and this tutorial, there's a lot of concepts that are probably still a little fuzzy, but I hope that just following along, you'll kind of be able to see the use cases for these different concepts and how you could apply them in your own project. And if your own project has any sort of this type of search functionality, or if you'd like it to, then you can just follow along and implement it just like this. So it's still just loading. Once it's done loading, we'll take a look. Okay, it's done loading in the browser. Let's hop over here, clicking View App. Oh, there we go. All right, look at that. We have a text box. That's a lot of work for just a little text box, right? But not only do we have a text box, we have a text box that is now ready to send data to another page when we search, which is pretty cool. So let's try and set that up now. And if this video gets too long, then I'll split it into two. But let's see if we can now set up our text box, this search, where if we were to type in a professor's name, we were to type in Scott, and then maybe we probably need a button as well, actually, where we click search, or when we press enter, it searches. But let's try and set it up where if we type in something, then it'll send this value to another page in our project. And that would be a good stopping point, I think. Okay, let's go back over to Mendix Studio Pro. So how would we go about that? How do we send data? Well, actually, the first thing before we get there, we should probably add a search button. I should have added that already, but that's good. This will have to do with the next steps of our project. So how do we do that? Well, let's hop over to our toolbox and let's take a look at any buttons we have. Let's see if we can find a button. There we go, buttons. Look at all these. Okay. So let's create a button that is an open page button. You could also create a microflow or a nanoflow to open a page. Maybe eventually we'll need to do that, but just trying to keep it as simple as possible. What I'm picturing is that when you click search, it will open a page that displays a result or a list of search results based on the input value that's in this text box. And so when you click open page, it'll pass that data to the page that you are now navigating to. So let's create an open page button. I'm just going to drag this in right here. And let's make it open the professor's overview page for now. Okay, there's our button. Let's change a little bit of the styling on the button and make it look a little bit more like a search button. So let's hop back over to properties for this data view. And we need to make it so that it's aligning in a row, not a column like this. And so there's a couple of different ways you could do this. I just want to experiment and see if we do this, what does it do? A lot of Mendix's styling is just kind of trying different things. I don't think any of these are what we're looking for. So I'll show you guys a different design tool that hopefully will be helpful. If you hop over to properties, or sorry, not properties, toolbox, under widgets, there should be a layout grid. And this is a pretty useful little tool. I'm just dropping this layout grid in here, and what this does is it creates like rows and columns for you, which really helps with styling your app. So let's make this maybe 6-6 like this. Okay, so this is what we just dropped in, this layout grid. We have a row and a column in here. And so if we were to just drop in the input and the professor overview, now we see, okay, now they're laid out horizontally. That's pretty cool. The next thing we can do is let's fix the text and everything on this button. So instead of saying professor overview, let's make it say search. And we can add an icon right here. Let's do search icon, maybe that one. All right, that looks pretty good. Maybe we change the colors as well. We can go into button style right here, and you can see there's all sorts of different preset styles. Let's try the primary style, see how that looks. Yeah, that looks much better. And now suddenly this looks a little bit more like what you'd expect a search text in field to look like. Let's try and rerun this and take a look in the browser. All right, hopping over to the browser right now. Look at that, that looks much better. Cool, and if we click this, currently it should actually navigate to the professor's page. Let's see if it does that. Wow, look at that. It navigates to professors for us. That's pretty cool. If we do it again, there we go. That's great. So now we have that just set up pretty briefly. Let's make one last style change I think we should make though, is let's make this text box a little bit bigger. This is pretty small. Hey guys, sorry, I had to cut the video right there because I had to figure out the best way to make this box bigger for you guys. So let me show you how you can do that really fast. So let's hop back over to Studio Pro. And then I made just a couple of changes in here that are really easy to do. So I'll show you guys how to do that. The first thing is to start, if you go over, if you just click on this column inside of here, um, or you can go down here as well. You'll see row, column. Just click there and then go over to the properties panel for this column. And you'll see this desktop size. And so right now it's set to manual 6, or it was set to manual 6. Just make that 9, and that will make this text box bigger. And then once you do that, click over into this column right here and make this one size 3. And that will make it like a 75-25 ratio, which will make it look a little bit better. One other thing that you can also do if you want it just slightly bigger as well is you can click into this data view, and if you look right here, this is where you can add styling. And so without getting into the nitty gritty of it, this is actually a CSS line of code right here. And so all I'm doing is I'm just saying I want this data view to be 500 pixels wide. And you can look up all these different CSS commands online, but this is a really simple one that I figured would be, a good one to learn. Is just you can set height and width like this for your boxes. And so that's all I did. I just set this data view right here inside of the common style section to width 500 pixels. And then I set these two columns to be 75-25 ratio. And that's all I changed. So because this video is already pretty long, I'll probably just end it here. In the next video, we'll go over how to actually like get this text box input to actually send over to another page so that we can actually use it to search, which will be really cool. So that's what we'll do in the next video. Looking forward to it.